The bay gelding had been lame for 7 days straight, and Jake Russell was about ready to lose his mind over it. The horse stood in the small corral behind the boarding house in Quartzsite, Arizona, favoring his left front leg like it might fall clean off if he put any weight on it, and Jake had tried everything he could think of to fix the problem. He had checked for stones lodged in the hoof, examined every inch of the leg for swelling or heat, wrapped it in cool cloths, unwrapped it, walked the horse slow circles until his own boots wore thin, and even consulted old Tom Hendricks, who claimed to know horses better than he knew his own wife. Nothing worked. The gelding just kept standing there with that miserable look in his dark eyes, and Jake felt more useless with each passing day. It was August of 1882, and the Arizona heat beat down on everything with the weight of a blacksmith's hammer. Quartzsite sat in the middle of the desert like a scattering of weathered wooden buildings that refused to blow away despite every attempt the wind made. Jake had been passing through on his way to California when the horse went lame, and now he was stuck in this dusty town spending what little money he had on boarding fees and veterinary advice that amounted to nothing more than shrugs and sympathetic headshakes. The morning of the 8th day dawned hot and bright, the sun climbing over the distant mountains and turning the sky from purple to pink to that hard, brilliant blue that hurt to look at directly. Jake stood at the corral fence with his hat pushed back on his head, watching the gelding hobble a few steps before stopping again. The horse had been his companion for 3 years, a solid animal with good instincts and a calm temperament that made long rides bearable. Seeing him like this made Jake's chest tight with worry and frustration in equal measure. You need someone who actually knows what they are doing. The voice came from behind him, and Jake turned to find a woman standing a few feet away. She wore a simple cotton dress the color of faded sage, practical boots that had seen plenty of use, and a wide-brimmed hat that cast her face in shadow. What he could see of her features showed a young woman, probably not much past 20, with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "I have had 3 different people look at him," Jake said, hearing the defensive edge in his own voice. "Nobody can figure out what is wrong. 3 different people who do not know horses the way they should," the woman said, not unkindly. She moved past him to the corral fence, and Jake caught a scent of lavender soap and something else, maybe peppermint. "May I take a look?" Jake gestured at the corral. "Be my guest. Cannot make things any worse." The woman climbed over the fence with an ease that spoke of long practice, landing lightly on the other side. The gelding watched her approach with his ears pricked forward, curious but not alarmed. She moved slowly, talking to the horse in a low, steady voice that Jake could not quite make out the words to. When she reached the animal, she ran her hand down his neck, still talking, and then gradually worked her way down to the injured leg. Jake watched from the fence as she examined the horse with careful, practiced movements. She lifted the hoof, studied it from every angle, set it down gently, then ran her hands up the cannon bone, over the knee, up to the shoulder. The gelding stood perfectly still for her, which was remarkable in itself since he had been fractious and nervous with the other people who had examined him. After several minutes, the woman straightened up and patted the horse's neck. She walked back to the fence with the same unhurried movements, her expression thoughtful. "It is not in the hoof or the leg," she said. "The problem is higher up in his shoulder. He has a misalignment, probably from compensating for some other small injury that healed wrong. The muscles are all knotted up, pulling everything out of place." Jake stared at her. "How can you tell that just from looking?" "I can feel it," she said simply. "If you want, I can fix it. It will take about an hour, maybe less." "An hour?" Jake heard the skepticism in his voice. Tom Hendricks said there was nothing to be done except rest and time. Tom Hendricks shoes horses and pulls teeth when the barber is drunk, the woman said with a slight smile. He does not actually understand how a horse's body works. I do. There was no arrogance in her tone, just a statement of fact. Jake found himself nodding before he had fully decided to trust her. All right, what do you need? Just time and space to work. You can watch if you stay quiet. She went back into the corral, and this time she carried herself with clear purpose. Jake climbed up to sit on the fence rail, fascinated despite his doubts. The woman positioned herself at the gelding's shoulder and began to work her hands along the muscles there, pressing and kneading with firm, deliberate movements. The horse shifted his weight, then settled, lowering his head as if he understood that something good was happening. Jake lost track of time watching her work. She moved with complete focus, her hands finding tension points and working them loose, sometimes pressing hard enough that he could see the effort in her shoulders, other times using lighter, circular motions that seemed almost gentle. She talked to the horse the whole time, that same low, steady voice, and the gelding stood for her like he was hypnotized. When she finally stepped back, wiping her hands on her dress, less than an hour had passed. The gelding took a tentative step, then another, then walked a small circle around the corral, putting equal weight on all four legs. Jake stared in disbelief. How did you do that? I told you. The shoulder was out of alignment. She climbed back over the fence and stood beside him, both of them watching the horse move with easy, natural strides. He should be fine now. Just do not push him too hard for the next few days while everything settles back into place. Jake turned to look at her properly for the first time. In the full morning light, he could see that she had a face that was more striking than pretty, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw, and those remarkable eyes that seemed to shift between brown and gold depending on how the light hit them. She met his gaze directly, waiting. He opened his mouth to thank her, to ask her name, to say something, anything, but his brain had gone completely blank. The words just vanished like water poured on desert sand, leaving him standing there with his mouth slightly open like some kind of fool. The woman's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. "You are welcome," she said after the silence had stretched long enough to become awkward. Yes, thank you," Jake finally managed, feeling heat rise in his face that had nothing to do with the August sun. "That was. How did you?" "Practice and study," she said. "My father was a veterinarian back in Pennsylvania. He taught me everything he knew before he died." "I am sorry," Jake said, finding his voice again even if his brain still felt like it was moving through molasses. "About your father." "It was 2 years ago. We manage." She glanced back at the gelding. "Your horse is a good animal. You have taken good care of him. Not good enough if I could not figure out what was wrong. You cannot know what you were never taught." She turned to leave, and Jake felt a sudden panic at the thought of her just walking away. "Wait," he said, and she paused. "I need to pay you for your time and your skill. I do not charge for helping animals. Then let me buy you breakfast or lunch, whatever meal happens next." The words came out in a rush, surprising him as much as they seemed to surprise her. She studied him for a long moment, and Jake found himself unable to look away from those eyes. Breakfast already happened. Lunch is 4 hours away. "But I would take a cup of coffee if you know where to find a decent one in this town." "The boarding house has coffee," Jake said, gesturing toward the building behind them. "It is not fancy, but it is hot and strong. That will work." They walked together toward the boarding house, and Jake tried to collect his scattered thoughts. He felt like he had been kicked by a horse, that same dizzy, breathless sensation, except without any of the pain. Just confusion and something else, something warm spreading through his chest that made him want to keep talking to this woman, to learn everything about her. The boarding house dining room was empty except for Mrs. Chen, the owner, who was wiping down tables with brisk efficiency. She looked up when they entered and smiled. "Mr. Russell and Miss Violet, nice to see you together." "You know each other?" Jake asked, looking between them. "Miss Violet Peters boards here, same as you," Mrs. Chen said. "Though I think you have been too worried about your horse to notice much of anything these past days." Jake felt his face heat again. "I guess I have been distracted." Violet smiled at Mrs. Chen. "Could we get 2 cups of coffee?" Of course, of course. Sit, sit." They settled at a table near the window where a faint breeze moved the thin curtains. Mrs. Chen brought coffee in thick ceramic mugs, and steam rose from the dark liquid in lazy spirals. Jake wrapped his hands around his mug, glad to have something to do with them. "So," Violet said, "what brings you to Quartzsite, besides a lame horse?" "I was heading to California. There is supposed to be work on the big ranches out there, and I have experience with cattle drives and horse training." Jake took a sip of coffee, letting the bitter heat ground him. "I worked for the Running J Ranch outside of Santa Fe for 5 years before the owner died and his son sold off most of the stock. Figured it was time to move on. Santa Fe is a long way from here. About 400 miles, give or take. We were making good time until the gelding went lame." He paused. "What about you?" "Pennsylvania is even farther." Violet's expression became more guarded. "My father had consumption. The doctors said dry air might help, so we came west 2.5 years ago. By the time we settled in Quartzsite, it was too late. He died 6 months after we arrived." "That must have been hard, being so far from home with no family." "I had my father until the end. That mattered more than geography." She looked down at her coffee. "After he passed, I thought about going back east, but there was nothing there for me anymore. My mother died when I was 12 and we had no other close relatives. Here, at least, I can use what my father taught me. Working with animals, mostly horses, some cattle, whatever people need help with. The ranches around here know I can handle difficult animals, treat minor injuries, that sort of thing. It is not the same as having a veterinary practice in a city, but it keeps me fed and housed." Jake found himself leaning forward, drawn by the calm competence in her voice. "That is remarkable. I have never met a woman who knew so much about horses." "That is because most people do not bother to teach women anything useful," Violet said with a slight edge to her tone. "My father did not see any reason why I should not learn his profession. He said skill and knowledge were not determined by what was between your legs." Jake nearly choked on his coffee at her bluntness. "He sounds like he was a wise man." "He was." Violet's expression softened. "He also said I had better hands than him, better instincts. I think he was just being kind, but I tried to live up to it." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, drinking coffee and watching the street outside the window. A freight wagon rumbled past, kicking up dust that hung in the still air. A dog trotted along the boardwalk, tongue lolling in the heat. Life in Quartzsite moved at its own slow pace, unhurried by anything except the sun's progression across the sky. "How long were you planning to stay here?" Violet asked. "I was going to leave yesterday, but obviously that did not work out. Now that the gelding is sound, I suppose I can head out tomorrow or the next day." Even as he said it, Jake felt a strange reluctance at the idea of leaving. California is not going anywhere. No, but work might be. "I heard they were hiring for a big drive up the coast, but that was 3 weeks ago. By now, those positions are probably filled." Violet tilted her head, studying him. "Is it just work you are after or something else?" The question caught Jake off guard. He had to think about it for a moment. really consider what had driven him to leave New Mexico and point himself west. Honestly, I am not entirely sure. The work is part of it, but I guess I also wanted to see something new, to not just spend my whole life in the same place doing the same things. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. I think that is why my father was willing to come west even when he was sick. He wanted one last adventure, one last chance to see something beyond the Pennsylvania hills he had known his whole life. Did he get it? I think so. He loved the desert, the mountains, the big sky. He said it made him feel small in a good way, like he was part of something vast and ancient. Violet smiled, but there was sadness in it. The last thing he told me was not to be afraid of being alone. He said solitude could be a gift if you knew how to accept it. Are you? Alone, I mean. Mostly. I have Mrs. Chen and a few of the ranch families who are kind to me, but in the ways that matter, yes, I am alone. She met his eyes. What about you? Same. My parents died when I was 17. Scarlet fever took them both within a week of each other. I have been on my own since then, moving from ranch to ranch, never really settling anywhere. That sounds lonely. It is, Jake admitted, but I told myself it was freedom instead. Violet nodded slowly. I understand that. It is easier to keep moving than to risk putting down roots and having them torn up. The understanding in her voice made something in Jake's chest ache. He had the sudden, irrational feeling that he had been looking for this woman without knowing it, that she represented something he had been missing without being able to name it. The intensity of the feeling scared him a little. Mrs. Chen returned to refill their coffee cups, chatting about the heat and the lack of rain and the new mercantile that was supposedly going to open next month. When she left again, Violet glanced at Jake over the rim of her mug. You got very quiet, she said, just thinking. About what? Jake hesitated, then decided to be honest. About how strange it is that I have been staying in this boarding house for a week and never noticed you until today. I am good at being unnoticed when I want to be, and you were preoccupied with your horse. That is a poor excuse. I should have noticed you. Why? The question was asked lightly, but Jake sensed real curiosity behind it. He set down his coffee cup and looked at her directly. Because you are remarkable. Anyone with eyes should notice that. Color rose in Violet's cheeks, and she looked away, but not before Jake saw pleasure flash across her face. You do not know me well enough to say that. I know you fixed in an hour what 4 other people could not fix in a week. I know you learned a difficult profession from your father and kept practicing it even after he died. I know you are brave enough to live alone in a rough town far from where you were raised. He paused. That seems pretty remarkable to me. You are making me sound more impressive than I am. I do not think so. They looked at each other across the table and something unspoken passed between them. Jake felt his heart beating faster, could see the pulse jumping at the base of Violet's throat. The moment stretched, fragile and full of possibility. Mr. Russell. The shout came from outside, followed by rapid footsteps on the boarding house porch. A young man burst into the dining room, dusty and out of breath. Mr. Russell, is that your bay gelding in the back corral? Jake stood quickly, alarm shooting through him. Yes. What is wrong? Nothing is wrong. The opposite, actually. I saw him walking around out there looking sound as a dollar. Word around town was he had been lame for days. What happened? Jake glanced at Violet, who had remained seated looking amused. Miss Peters happened. She fixed him. The young man's eyes widened. Miss Violet? Well, that makes sense. She worked on my father's mare last month, the one that had been kicking at her own belly. Colic, we thought, but Miss Violet said it was something else, something twisted inside. She got the mare to pass it, and now she is good as new. He turned to Violet. My father said to tell you if we ever saw you that he is grateful. I am glad the mare recovered, Violet said. Miss Violet, if you fixed Mr. Russell's horse, maybe you could help us with something else. We have a young stallion at our ranch, wild caught, and nobody can get near him without risking getting kicked. Pa says we might have to shoot him because he is too dangerous, but I hate to see such a fine animal put down. Would you be willing to take a look? Violet considered. Where is your ranch? About 8 miles northeast, up in the foothills. We could pay you for your time. I would need to see the horse first before I promise anything. Some animals are beyond help. Could you come today? I have a wagon outside. Violet looked at Jake and he saw the question in her eyes. I should come with you, he said. If this stallion is as dangerous as this young man says, you might need help. I usually work alone. I know, but humor me. A small smile touched Violet's lips. All right, let me get my kit. She left the dining room, and the young man turned to Jake with an eager expression. Is Miss Violet really as good as people say? I have heard she can gentle a horse just by talking to it. I do not know about that, but she is the best I have ever seen. Your father is smart to want her help. Violet returned a few minutes later carrying a worn leather satchel. She had changed into riding clothes, a split skirt and sturdy shirt that would allow her to move freely. Jake felt his mouth go dry looking at her, and he had to forcibly remind himself to breathe normally. They climbed into the wagon, and the young man introduced himself as Billy Martin. He talked the entire 8 miles to his family's ranch, mostly about the wild stallion and how beautiful it was, and how sad everyone would be if they had to destroy it. Jake only half listened, too aware of Violet sitting beside him on the wagon bench, her shoulder occasionally brushing his when they hit a rough patch of road. The Martin Ranch was a modest spread tucked into the base of the Dome Rock Mountains, where the desert gave way to rocky slopes and scattered juniper trees. The house and outbuildings were well maintained, and Jake could see several horses in a large corral near the barn. A separate smaller corral held a single animal, a magnificent buckskin stallion with a black mane and tail. The horse paced the fence line, head high, nostrils flared. An older man came out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. Billy, you brought Miss Violet. Thank you for coming. Mr. Martin, Violet said, jumping down from the wagon with easy grace. Billy said you have a problem horse. That is putting it mildly. Come see. They walked to the corral holding the stallion, and the horse wheeled away from them, snorting and striking at the ground with his front hooves. He was young, maybe 4 years old, with the powerful build and wild eyes of an animal that had never known a gentle hand. Where did you get him? Violet asked. Found him running with a wild herd up in the mountains. He was injured, had a rope burn around his neck like someone had tried to catch him before. We managed to get him in the corral, but that is as far as we have gotten. He will not let anyone near him, and he is tearing himself up trying to break free. Violet studied the stallion in silence, her expression thoughtful. Jake watched her rather than the horse, fascinated by the intensity of her focus. He has been hurt by people, Violet finally said. That rope burn tells me someone was rough with him, probably tried to break him using force. Now he associates all humans with pain and fear. Can you help him? Mr. Martin asked. Maybe. It will take time, though. More than an hour, probably more than a day. He needs to learn that not all people will hurt him, and that is a slow process. We can pay you to stay here and work with him. Room and board plus wages. Violet glanced at Jake. What about you? Were you not planning to leave for California? Jake surprised himself with his answer. California can wait. I would like to see how this turns out. We could use an extra hand around here, Mr. Martin said. If you are willing to work, I can pay you too. Deal. Over the next week, Jake learned more about horses and patience than he had in his entire life before. Violet worked with the buckskin stallion every day, sometimes for hours at a time. She never approached the horse directly, never tried to force him to accept her presence. Instead, she simply existed in his space, moving slowly around the corral, talking in that low, steady voice, occasionally tossing small bits of apple or carrot in the stallion's direction. For the first 3 days, the horse wanted nothing to do with her. He stayed on the far side of the corral, watching her with suspicious eyes, ready to bolt or attack if she came too close. Violet never pushed. She just kept showing up, kept moving calmly through her routine, kept talking. Jake helped with the regular ranch work during the day, mending fences and moving cattle and doing all the tasks that kept a ranch running. But whenever he had a break, he found himself at the stallion's corral, watching Violet work. Mr. Martin noticed and ribbed him good-naturedly about it. "You are sweet on her," the older man said one afternoon as they repaired a section of fence. Jake did not bother denying it. "Is it that obvious? Only to anyone with eyes. Does she know?" "I have no idea. I am not even sure what to do about it." "Tell her." "Life is too short to waste on might-have-beens." "What if she does not feel the same way?" Mr. Martin shrugged. "Then at least you will know and you can move on. But I have seen the way she looks at you when she thinks nobody is watching. I would bet money the feeling is mutual." The thought made Jake's heart race. He tried to tell himself not to get his hopes up, but it was too late for that. Every day he spent near Violet just made him more certain that she was someone special, someone worth taking a risk for. On the 4th day, the stallion ate an apple from Violet's hand. It was a small victory, but she smiled so brightly that Jake felt his breath catch. The horse still would not let her touch him, but accepting food was progress. That evening, Jake found Violet sitting on the porch of the Martin house, looking out at the sunset-painted mountains. He settled beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "You are doing amazing work with that horse," he said. "He is starting to trust. That is the hard part." Violet glanced at him. "Thank you for staying. I know this is delaying your trip. There will always be other trips. This feels more important. Helping a horse, being here. With you." The words hung between them, more significant than Jake had intended but no less true for it. Violet turned to look at him fully, her expression searching. "Jake, I need to tell you something." His stomach dropped. "All right." "I do not usually let people get close to me. After my father died, I decided it was easier to keep everyone at a distance. Safer." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But you make me want to try something different. You make me think that maybe being alone is not the same as being safe." Relief and joy flooded through Jake in equal measure. "I feel the same way. I have spent years telling myself I preferred moving around, not getting attached to places or people. But then you fixed my horse in an hour and looked at me like I was worth talking to, and suddenly I cannot imagine just riding away and never seeing you again. So what do we do about that?" "I have no idea," Jake admitted. "I am not good at this. I have never felt like this before." Violet smiled. "Neither have I. Maybe we can figure it out together." "I would like that." They sat together watching the sky fade from orange to purple to deep blue, and Jake felt something settle in his chest. A sense of rightness, of being exactly where he was supposed to be. The next morning, Violet entered the stallion's corral and the horse did not retreat to the far side. He stood his ground, watching her warily but without the immediate panic that had characterized his earlier reactions. Violet moved slowly toward him, one hand extended, talking all the while. When she was close enough to touch, she paused and waited. The stallion stretched his neck, sniffing at her hand. Then, slowly, carefully, he allowed her to place her palm against his neck. Jake, watching from outside the corral with the Martin family, felt tears prick his eyes at the beauty of the moment. The wild horse and the patient woman, finding trust in each other. Over the next few days, Violet continued working with the stallion, gradually getting him accustomed to her touch, to the weight of a halter, to being led around the corral. The horse transformed before their eyes, the wildness giving way to something calmer, though no less magnificent. "You have a gift," Mr. Martin told Violet one evening. "I have never seen anything like it. It is not a gift. It is understanding and time. Most people are not willing to give the time. Most people are not you." Jake and Violet fell into an easy rhythm during those days. They worked together during the day, ate meals with the Martin family in the evening, and talked long into the night about everything and nothing. Jake learned that Violet loved thunderstorms, hated pickles, and could recite long passages from Shakespeare that her father had taught her. Violet learned that Jake had a beautiful singing voice he rarely used, that he was afraid of deep water because he had nearly drowned as a child, and that he dreamed of someday owning his own small ranch. "Why do you not?" Violet asked one night as they sat together on the porch. "Money, mostly. Land is expensive, and I have spent most of my life working for wages rather than saving them." "What would you do with a ranch if you had one?" "Breed horses, probably. Good working horses that can handle the terrain out here. Maybe some cattle, but horses are what I love." He glanced at her. "What about you? What do you want?" Violet was quiet for a long moment. "I want what my father had. A practice where I can help animals make a real difference. I want to be valued for my skills, not dismissed because of my gender, and I want—" She trailed off. "What?" "I want someone to share it with. I did not think I did, but I do." Jake took her hand, marveling at the calluses on her palm, evidence of hard work and dedication. "You could have that, all of it." "Could I? In this world, in this time, how many people would accept a female veterinarian? How many would trust me with their animals? The ones worth knowing would. The Martin family does. Other ranchers around here do. You have proven yourself. In one small town in the middle of nowhere. What about bigger places, real cities? Do you want to be in a city?" Violet smiled. "No. I am asking the wrong questions. I do not need to prove myself to the whole world. I just need to be able to do the work I love and live my life on my own terms." "That seems like a reasonable goal. Does it include you?" The question was asked softly, but Jake heard the vulnerability beneath it. He squeezed her hand. "If you wanted to, I do." They kissed for the first time that night, a gentle, tentative touch of lips that sent fire racing through Jake's veins. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I have been wanting to do that for days," Jake admitted. "So have I." They kissed again, less tentatively this time, and Jake felt the world narrow down to just the two of them this moment, this perfect alignment of desire and affection and hope. 2 weeks after arriving at the Martin Ranch, Violet declared the buckskin stallion ready for his next phase of training. The horse would accept a saddle and bridle now, though he was not yet ready to be ridden. That would take more time and a skilled rider. Mr. Martin was delighted with the progress and insisted on paying Violet double what they had agreed upon. "You saved that horse's life," he said. "That is worth more than money, but money is what I have to give." "Thank you," Violet said, accepting the payment with grace. "What will you do with him now?" "Keep working with him. Use him for breeding eventually. He has excellent bloodlines, assuming we can trace back the wild herd he came from. Maybe someday one of my sons will ride him." Jake and Violet prepared to return to Quartzsite the next morning. As they loaded their few belongings into the wagon, Mrs. Martin pulled Violet aside. "That young man cares for you deeply," she said. "I hope you know that." "I do," Violet replied. "Do you care for him the same way?" "Yes." "Then do not let him get away." Good men are rare, and ones who see women as equals are rarer still. Violet hugged the older woman, surprised by the sudden emotion that welled up in her throat. "Thank you for your kindness." The ride back to Quartzsite was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Jake kept stealing glances at Violet, trying to memorize the way the sunlight caught in her hair, the determined set of her jaw, the capable hands holding the reins. He had no idea what happened next, but he knew he wanted to figure it out with her. When they arrived back at the boarding house, Mrs. Chen greeted them with her usual warmth and a knowing smile. "You are back. Good. I saved your rooms." "Thank you," Jake said. He helped Violet carry her bag upstairs and they paused outside her door. "What now?" Violet asked. "I have been thinking about that," Jake said. "I still need work, and California seems less appealing than it did a month ago. What if I stayed here in Quartzsite? I could pick up jobs at the local ranches, help you when you need an extra pair of hands with difficult animals. You would do that?" "I would do a lot more than that if you asked me to." Violet set down her bag and moved closer to him. "I am not used to having someone I can rely on. I am not sure I will be good at it. I am not used to staying in one place. We can be bad at it together." She laughed, and the sound made Jake's heart soar. "That is a terrible plan. Best I could come up with on short notice. We can refine it as we go. All right, let us try it." They spent the next few months building a life together in Quartzsite. Jake found steady work at several of the local ranches, splitting his time between them and building a reputation as a skilled horseman and reliable worker. Violet continued her work with animals, and word of her abilities spread. Ranchers from as far as 50 miles away began seeking her out when they had a horse or cow that needed special attention. They spent nearly every evening together, sharing meals and conversation, and increasingly passionate kisses that left them both aching for more. Jake wanted to rush things, to ask Violet to marry him right away, but some instinct told him to be patient. She needed to trust that he would not leave, that he was serious about building a life with her. In October, disaster struck one of the nearby ranches. A grass fire, started by lightning, swept through hundreds of acres and trapped a herd of cattle in a canyon. Jake joined the crew that fought the fire and helped drive the cattle to safety. He came back to Quartzsite exhausted, smoke-stained, and nursing burned hands where embers had landed on his gloves. Violet took one look at him and hustled him into her room at the boarding house, ignoring Mrs. Chen's raised eyebrows. She cleaned and bandaged his hands with gentle efficiency, scolding him the whole time for not being more careful. "I was as careful as I could be while also saving 24 cattle from roasting alive," Jake protested. "You could have been hurt much worse than this." "But I was not." Violet sat back, her hands still cradling his bandaged ones, and looked at him with fear naked in her eyes. "When Billy Martin came to find me and said there had been a fire and you were there helping fight it, I thought my heart would stop. All I could think was that I might lose you before I had told you everything I needed to say." "What do you need to say?" "That I love you, that you have become the most important person in my life, that the thought of living without you is unbearable." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I know we have only known each other a few months and maybe it is too soon, but I cannot help how I feel." Jake pulled his hands free of hers and cupped her face, using his bandaged thumbs to wipe away her tears. "It is not too soon. I love you too. I have loved you since you fixed my horse and looked at me like I was worth your time. I will love you until the day I die." They kissed with an urgency born of fear and relief, and the overwhelming need to confirm that they were both alive, both here, both committed to this impossible, wonderful thing growing between them. "Marry me," Jake said when they finally broke apart. "I know I do not have much to offer yet, but I will work every day to build a good life for us. I promise you that." You already offer me everything I need, Violet said. Yes, yes, I will marry you. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Quartzsite. The Martin family came, as did several other ranchers and their families whom Violet had helped over the months. Mrs. Chen cried happy tears and provided a wedding meal at the boarding house that featured her famous dumplings and far too much whiskey. Jake and Violet spent their wedding night in a room Mrs. Chen had decorated with desert wildflowers and clean white linens. They made love with a mixture of tenderness and passion, learning each other's bodies the way Violet had learned the muscles and bones of difficult horses through patient attention and gentle persistence. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Jake running his fingers through Violet's loose hair while she traced patterns on his chest. "I never thought I would have this," Violet said quietly. "After my father died, I was so certain I would spend my life alone. You were never going to be alone. You are too remarkable for that. You are biased. Absolutely, does not make it less true." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "What do we do now? We cannot live in the boarding house forever. I have been saving money. In another 6 months, maybe a year, we could afford to buy some land. Nothing huge, just enough for a small house and a corral for horses. You could work with animals there and I could build up a breeding program." "Our own place," Violet said wonderingly. "I like the sound of that. So do I." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and Jake dreamed of sun-baked adobe walls and corrals full of strong horses and Violet's laughter echoing across their own land. The next year brought hard work and steady progress toward their goal. Jake took every job he could find, working from before dawn until after dark most days. Violet's reputation continued to grow, and she began charging fair prices for her services rather than accepting whatever people chose to pay. Together, they saved every dollar they could spare. In the spring, Violet discovered she was pregnant. She told Jake one evening as they walked along the edge of town, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in shades of fire. "Are you sure?" Jake asked, his heart pounding with a mixture of joy and terror. "I am sure. I have seen enough pregnant animals to recognize the signs in myself." Jake swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "We are going to have a baby. Violet, we are going to have a baby. I am aware. I am the one carrying it. Are you happy about this?" "Terrified and happy in equal measure. What about you?" "Same." They held each other as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle over him, but it was a good weight, a purposeful one. He had a wife he loved and a child on the way. He needed to provide for them, to build the life he had promised Violet. 2 months later, Jake heard about a piece of land for sale just outside Quartzsite. 20 acres of desert with a reliable spring and a small adobe house that needed work, but had good bones. The price was more than they had saved, but it was within reach if they could come up with the extra money. Jake approached Mr. Martin about a loan, and the older man agreed without hesitation. "You and Violet are good people. I trust you to pay me back when you can." They moved onto their land in July, despite the brutal heat, because the baby was due in November and Jake wanted the house in good shape before then. He worked like a man possessed, repairing the roof, fixing cracks in the adobe walls, building a proper corral and a small barn. Violet helped as much as her growing belly allowed, and together they transformed the neglected property into a home. The neighbors they had, few and far between in that empty country, stopped by to welcome them and offer assistance. Word had spread about Violet's skills with animals, and several ranchers made it clear they would provide regular work if she wanted it. "After the baby comes," Violet said. "Right now, I need to focus on getting ready for that. November arrived with cooler temperatures and the baby's birth. Violet labored for 16 hours, attended by Mrs. Chen and another woman from town who had experience as a midwife. Jake paced outside the bedroom, certain that every cry of pain would be the last sound he ever heard his wife make. But Violet was strong, stronger than he had given her credit for, and just after dawn she delivered a healthy baby boy. The midwife brought the infant to Jake, placing the tiny, squalling bundle in his arms with a smile. "You have a son, and your wife is asking for you." Jake entered the bedroom to find Violet propped up against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. He sat beside her on the bed, carefully transferring the baby to her arms. "He is perfect," Violet whispered, examining the tiny fingers and toes. "Look what we made." "You did all the hard work. I just paced and worried." "You have been doing hard work for months getting this place ready for us. Do not sell yourself short." They named the boy Samuel after Jake's father. He was a good baby, quiet and content, and he grew quickly in the clean desert air. Jake and Violet adjusted to parenthood with the same patience and determination they brought to everything else, learning through trial and error and helping each other through the exhausting early months. By the time Samuel was 6 months old, Violet had returned to work with animals on a limited basis, bringing the baby with her when she made house calls to nearby ranches. The sight of her working with a fractious horse while Samuel slept in a basket nearby became familiar to the ranching families of the area. Jake established his breeding program, starting with his bay Gelding and 2 mares he purchased from Mr. Martin. The horses he bred were known for their intelligence and steady temperaments, and he began selling young stock to ranchers who wanted reliable working animals. The years passed with the rhythm of desert seasons. Samuel grew into a curious, adventurous little boy who loved horses as much as his parents did. When he was 3, Violet gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, a dark-haired, strong-willed child who seemed determined to keep up with her older brother from the moment she could walk. Jake and Violet's reputation spread throughout the territory. They were known as the couple to see if you had a problem horse or needed quality breeding stock. Their small ranch prospered modestly, enough to keep them comfortable and allow them to expand gradually over time. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jake and Violet sat together on the porch of their house, watching Samuel and Rose play with a young foal in the corral. The evening was cool, a hint of autumn in the air, and the mountains glowed golden in the sunset light. "Do you ever regret it?" Jake asked. "Staying here instead of going to California or back east to a city where you might have had an easier time establishing a practice?" Violet leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "Not for a single moment. This life, this place, you and our children, this is everything I ever wanted even when I did not know I wanted it. Even though it is hard sometimes, even though we struggle, especially because of that, easy things are not usually worth having." She turned to look at him. "What about you? Do you regret not continuing on to California?" "The only thing I regret is all the years I wasted before I met you. I wish I had found you sooner." "We found each other at exactly the right time. Any earlier and we might not have been ready." Jake thought about that and decided she was right. He had needed those years of wandering to appreciate what it meant to have a home, a purpose, a family. And Violet had needed time to heal from her father's death and find her own strength before she could share her life with someone else. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children, listening to the evening sounds of the desert. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and one of the horses in the corral answered with a low whinny. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and dust and the promise of cooler weather to come. You remember the day we met? Violet asked. When you could not find any words after I fixed your horse, Jake laughed. I remember feeling like the biggest fool in Arizona. You must have thought I was simple-minded. I thought you were overwhelmed, and I thought you had kind eyes. I took one look at you and forgot how to speak. That had never happened to me before. It has not happened since, either. You talk more than anyone I know. Only to you. You are the only person I want to tell everything to. Violet kissed him, and even after 10 years the touch of her lips still made Jake's heart race. Some things never changed, and he was grateful for that. Samuel came running up to the porch, his face flushed with excitement. Papa, the foal let me touch his nose. He was not scared at all. That is because you were gentle and patient, Jake said, just like your mother taught you. Can I help train him when he is bigger? Of course. But that will not be for a few years yet. He needs to grow strong first. Rose toddled after her brother, demanding to be picked up. Violet obliged, settling the little girl on her lap. Are you having fun, sweetheart? Horsey, Rose declared, pointing at the corral. Yes, that is a horse. A very young one. The four of them sat together on the porch as the sun completed its descent, and the sky faded from orange to purple. Jake felt a deep contentment settle over him, a bone-deep satisfaction with the life they had built. It was not an easy life by any measure. The desert was harsh, money was often tight, and there were times when he worried about whether they could sustain themselves. But they had each other, and they had work that mattered, and they had this place that belonged to them. I love you, he told Violet, needing to say it even though she already knew. I love you too, she replied, squeezing his hand. They put the children to bed as the stars emerged, bright and infinite in the clear desert sky. Samuel wanted 3 stories, and Rose needed her favorite blanket adjusted 5 different ways before she would settle. By the time Jake and Violet finally retreated to their own bedroom, they were both exhausted. But not too exhausted to hold each other, to appreciate the simple miracle of another day together, another night in their own home with their children safe and healthy nearby. Jake kissed Violet's forehead and felt her relax against him. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For fixing my horse that day, for giving me a chance, for building this life with me. Thank you for staying, for seeing me as an equal, for loving me the way you do. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the way they had every night for the past 10 years, and the way they would for all the years to come. The seasons continued their cycle, and the Russell family continued to grow and thrive. Samuel grew into a skilled horseman, inheriting his mother's gift for understanding animals and his father's patience. Rose developed an unexpected talent for numbers and helped manage the ranch's books once she was old enough, keeping track of breeding records and sales with meticulous attention to detail. When Samuel was 12 and Rose was 9, Violet gave birth to another son, Benjamin. The boy was a surprise, coming along when they had thought their family was complete, but he was welcomed with joy. Benjamin was quieter than his siblings, more contemplative, and he showed an early interest in the healing arts that made Violet think he might follow in her footsteps. The ranch expanded gradually over the years. Jake and Violet purchased adjacent land when it became available, increasing their holdings to nearly 100 acres. The horse breeding program flourished, with buyers coming from as far away as California and Texas to purchase Russell-bred stock. Violet became something of a legend in the territory. Stories circulated about her ability to calm wild horses, to diagnose illnesses that other veterinarians missed, to heal animals that others had given up on. She trained several apprentices over the years, passing on her knowledge to a new generation, though she never found anyone with quite the same instinctive understanding of animal behavior that she possessed. Jake built a reputation of his own as a fair dealer and a skilled horseman. He was elected to several local positions over the years, serving terms as a town councilman and eventually as mayor of Quartzsite for a brief period. He used those positions to advocate for better resources for the growing community, including a proper school and improved water management. Through all of it, their marriage remained the bedrock of their lives. They had their disagreements, of course. Two strong-willed people living and working together could not avoid conflict entirely. But they had learned early on how to fight fair, how to listen to each other, how to compromise when necessary and stand firm when it mattered. On their 20th anniversary, their children surprised them with a celebration. Samuel, now a young man of 23 with a wife of his own, had organized the event with help from his siblings. Nearly 100 people showed up, friends and neighbors and business associates, all gathering to honor the couple who had become pillars of their community. Jake looked around at the crowd and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. He had started out as a drifter with nothing but a lame horse and a vague plan to go to California. Now he had a home, a family, a thriving business, and the love of a remarkable woman who still made his heart race when she smiled at him. Violet stood beside him, her hand in his, and he knew she was feeling the same thing. They had built something real and lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. "I never forgot my words after that first day," Jake told her later that night when the party was over and they were alone. "I just could not believe my luck that someone like you would give someone like me a chance." "You gave yourself short shrift then, and you still do now," Violet replied. "You were worth taking a chance on. You proved that every single day since. We both got lucky, maybe. Or maybe we just recognized something in each other that we needed." Jake pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her body against his. "I would do it all again, exactly the same way, every single moment, even the lame horse. Especially the lame horse. Without him, I never would have met you." They made love that night with the same passion and tenderness that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. Age had marked them both, lines appearing on their faces, gray threading through their hair, but the connection between them remained as strong as ever. As Jake drifted toward sleep afterward, Violet tucked against his side, he thought about the long chain of chance events that had brought them together. A horse going lame at exactly the right place and time. A woman with the knowledge and courage to help. A man foolish enough to forget his words but smart enough to stay around and figure out what really mattered. Life was strange and unpredictable, and sometimes brutally hard. But it was also full of unexpected grace, of moments when everything aligned just right, and you found yourself exactly where you were supposed to be. The years continued to pass, bringing the inevitable changes that time always brought. Mr. Martin died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, and Jake served as a pallbearer at his funeral, remembering the kindness the older man had shown to two young people trying to figure out their lives. Mrs. Chen sold the boarding house and moved to California to live with her daughter, and Jake and Violet traveled to visit her once, a journey that took them through the places Jake had once planned to go alone. Samuel took over more of the day-to-day operations of the ranch as Jake's joints grew stiffer and his energy waned. Rose married a schoolteacher and moved to Tucson, though she visited frequently and still helped with the books remotely. Benjamin apprenticed with his mother and eventually took over most of her veterinary work, allowing Violet to slow down and focus on the most interesting or challenging cases. Jake and Violet grew old together, their bodies wearing out even as their love for each other deepened and matured. They spent more time sitting on the porch, less time working the horses. They told stories to their grandchildren, passing on family history and the lessons they had learned over a lifetime of hard work and dedication. One evening, when they were both in their 70s, Jake and Violet sat together watching the sunset as they had done thousands of times before. The air was cool, autumn settling into the desert, and the light painted everything in shades of gold and amber. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had gone back to Pennsylvania after your father died?" Jake asked. Violet thought about it. "Sometimes. But I cannot imagine any version of that life being better than this one. Can you imagine what you would have done in California?" "Probably worked myself to death on some big ranch, never knowing what I was missing, never knowing you or our children or this place. We were lucky to find each other, lucky and stubborn. We could have let fear keep us apart, but we did not." Violet squeezed his hand. "No, we did not." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and the stars emerged. Jake's body ached in a dozen places. His hands were permanently gnarled from years of hard work, and he knew he had more yesterdays than tomorrows left. But he had no regrets. He had lived a full life, a meaningful life, a life defined by love and purpose and the satisfaction of building something lasting. "Thank you," he told Violet again, the same words he had spoken so many times over the years. "For what? For everything. For fixing my horse, for fixing me. You were never broken, just lost. Then thank you for helping me find my way home." Violet leaned her head on his shoulder, and they watched the stars together, two people who had started out alone and built a life that neither of them could have imagined. The desert wind whispered through the sage, carrying the scent of dust and horses and the promise of another day to come. Jake Russell had come to Quartzsite, Arizona in August of 1882, with nothing but a lame horse and uncertain plans. He had met a woman who could fix in an hour what no one else could fix in a week, and she had stolen his words and his heart in equal measure. Together, they had built a ranch, raised a family, and created a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. It was more than enough. It was everything. And on cool evenings when the work was done and the grandchildren had gone home and the horses were settled in their stalls, Jake and Violet Russell still sat together on their porch, hands clasped, hearts intertwined, grateful for every moment they had been given and every choice that had brought them to this place. The love story that began with a lame horse and a woman's skill and a cowboy's forgotten words had grown into something vast and enduring, a testament to the power of chance encounters and the courage to take a risk on love. In the end, that was the only story that mattered. Not the individual struggles or triumphs, not the specific details of daily life, but the simple, profound truth that two people had found each other in a harsh and unforgiving landscape and had chosen to build something beautiful together. The desert remembered them long after they were gone, the way it remembered all those who had loved it and been shaped by it. Their children and grandchildren continued their work, breeding horses and healing animals and maintaining the ranch that had become a landmark in the community. And sometimes, on clear nights when the stars shone bright and the wind carried the scent of sage, people swore they could feel the presence of Jake and Violet Russell, still sitting on their porch, still holding hands, still grateful for the unexpected grace that had brought them together all those years ago. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West and nurtured through decades of hard work and unwavering commitment. It was proof that the best things in life often came from the most unexpected places, and that love, once found, could weather any storm and outlast any hardship. Jake and Violet Russell had found their happily ever after not in spite of the challenges they faced, but because of their willingness to face those challenges together. Their story became part of the fabric of Quartzsite, Arizona, inspiring future generations to take chances, to value skill and determination over convention, and to never underestimate the power of one perfect moment when two souls recognized each other and chose to build a life together. The bay gelding that started it all lived to be 23 years old, spending his final years in peaceful retirement in the Russell pasture. When he finally passed, Jake buried him on a hill overlooking their land with a simple marker that read, "Here lies the horse that brought me home." And that, truly, was the heart of the matter. Sometimes it took losing your words to find your voice. Sometimes it took a week of frustration to lead you to an hour of revelation. And sometimes it took a lame horse, a skilled woman, and a cowboy willing to stay and see what happened next to create a love story that would endure for generations. The Russell Ranch continued to thrive long after Jake and Violet had passed into memory, and then into legend. Their great-grandchildren still raised horses there, still told the story of how it all began, still honored the legacy of two people who had refused to let hardship or convention or fear stand in the way of building the life they wanted. And if you visited Quartzsite, Arizona, and asked the old-timers about the best love story they had ever heard, chances were good they would tell you about Jake Russell and Violet Peters, about a lame horse and a miraculous cure and a cowboy who forgot his words but found his heart. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing down through the years. Because in the end, the best stories were always the true ones, the ones about real people who faced real challenges and found real love in the most unexpected places. Jake and Violet Russell had lived their story fully, holding nothing back, giving everything to each other and to the life they built together. They had left behind more than just land and horses and children. They had left behind proof that love could flourish even in the harshest environments, that partnerships based on respect and mutual admiration could weather any storm, and that sometimes the best decision you could ever make was to stay instead of leave, to take a chance instead of playing it safe, to open your heart instead of keeping it locked away. Their story ended the way all good stories should end, with love triumphant and family thriving and a legacy that would endure. It was a closed ending, complete and satisfying, with no loose threads or unanswered questions. Jake and Violet had lived well, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. And really, what more could anyone ask for than that?